Hello and welcome to episode 2 of LA Meekly, the podcast.
Zafran.
Gonzalez?
Zafran.
My old business partner?
Zafran.
I thought I killed you after the last episode.
Just because you left me at the mall doesn't mean I'm dead. You will be visited by 3 ghosts. The first ghost, the ghost of Christmas past. The second ghost, the ghost of Christmas present.
You know I'm Jewish, right?
Oh, that explains it.
I don't want the Christmas Carol package. Could you show me what it would be like if I was never born?
No.
Okay,
Hi.
so we come to you, dear listener, with heavy hearts because we recorded this episode for the first time last night.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's too soon. And we must have tapped into something that we ought not to have tapped into because apparently we left the lens cap on the microphone and there was no sound that was recorded. So we are doing this all again. So if we sound a little less shocked by what we're telling each other, that's the reason why. So we apologize.
We were crying last night.
We'll explain again, since you didn't hear it the first time, that this is going to be... We wanted to do an episode like this when it was appropriate on Halloween, but we couldn't get our act together by then. So we've decided to do it around this time of the year. We are doing Creepy Christmas, Haunted Hanukkah. We're going to tell creepy/haunted legends and just various, high-profile crimes that have occurred that are ingrained in the LA culture and history.
Right. Some of these things were affected by the LA setting. Other things affected the LA setting.
Yeah. It all became part of the tapestry that is New York City.
St. Louis.
All right, so we're each going to tell 3 stories.
Around campfire.
Yeah. You will be visited by 3 stories. The story of Christmas past, the story of Christmas present, and the story of what's going to happen to all of you if you don't write a nice review after you listen to this episode. So Greg's going to get it started and take it away.
I'm going to start with a very high-profile one. I learned about the Sharon Tate's murder when I was really, really young. And it was the most gruesome, morbid thing I had ever heard of because, it's awful. People are still fascinated by it. And then later in life, I learned that there was hauntings surrounded it. So I really wanted to delve into that, and I'm glad I did because it's very interesting. It doesn't only start with Sharon Tate. It goes back some years before that with Jean Harlow. That's actually where it starts. So I'm going to give you a couple addresses, let you think about it. We have Paul Byrne's house, 9820 Easton Drive, LA, California, 90210. It starts here at Paul Byrne's house. He is a MGM film executive. He marries Jean Harlow, who's a young, beautiful actress at the time. She is the latest sex pot on the scene. She's very beautiful. She's blonde. She just shows off her cleavage to everybody. They get married when she's really young. He's 26 years older than her. He's considerably older. She's smitten with him, and he has been described a lot as just being indifferent towards her. Byrne didn't seem quite as happy as Harlow, and as the time went by, he became even less happy with the situation. He bought this house for her, which is on Easton Drive in the Hollywood Hills, and Harlow hated it and decided to sell it, but he put his foot down, claiming the house was where he wanted them to grow old together, which is weird because he really is all a lot.
He had already done that.
Anyways, let's get to the good stuff. Can we get to the good stuff, please?
Finally.
He kills himself in that house. He asked her to leave for the night. They had been fighting a lot, and there's a lot of different reports about why they fight. Some people think that he was having an affair. Other people think that it was because he was impotent, which he was telling everybody. There are some claims that he was gay.
Is he telling everybody
He told everybody, listen to this. And his death is a mystery, too. They find his dead body, and supposedly, I don't know how they figured this out, because it seemed to have been a snuffed up crime scene. I'll explain that in a bit. But he is just completely naked, and he smells of her fragrance, and there's just her stuff is everywhere. So a lot of people thought that she murdered him. A lot of people years later who would do biographies on Jean Harlow thinks that she knows who did it, but she didn't murder him. Not enough material for me. You don't pay me enough to do the research for this. The butler finds him dead. Before butler calls the cops, the butler calls two film producers, Louis Mayer and Irving Thalberg, and they come over and they rush over to the scene, and they're there for 2 hours before they call the cops. And Bird had, supposedly written a suicide note, and Mayer had stolen it and then returned it later. And the note's really funny, and it seems like it's something. I've read suicide notes before. I read yours all the time. This one does not seem like one. It seems very whimsical to me, and I'll read it to you right now. Dearest dear, unfortunately, this is the only way to make good the frightful wrong I have done you and wipe out my abject humiliation. I love you, Paul. You understand? Last night was only a comedy. Very strange now, don't you think? Now, they read this note to Jean Harlow, and she's not much help with it. She doesn't really get it. And if she does get it, it's very cryptic. If she does get it, she never tells anybody what it means. So there's this inside mystery to this. A lot of people think that he was murdered. I guess the film studios were trying to snuff up a scandal. Any evidence that might have leaned towards a certain direction has been pretty much wiped out by these two film producers. So after that, people move in that house after this suicide. You can't see me do quotations. I'm doing air quotations. Suicide happens. People claim to see Paul Byrne in the house. People neighboring the house and who live there claim to see a blonde woman who looks a little bit like Jean Harlow standing on the patio looking out. Oh, I forgot to mention. She dies very young too. Nothing suspicious. She has liver failure, but she's really young at the time when she dies. They claim to see Jean Harlow's ghost there. They hear voices. And some people claim to see Paul Byrne. This will come back to you in just a minute. There's been a couple other deaths on the property too. A man hung himself there. Another person has drowned in the pool. Let's skip over to the 60s now. Jay Sebring moves in here. Jay Sebring is the hairstylist to the stars. He is supposedly the basis for Warren Beatty's character in Shampoo. He's a very fanciful character. He moves in here. He's dating Sharon Tate at the time, who is a model barely turning into an actress. This is years before she meets Roman Polanski. She's staying over there. He leaves town, so she's there alone. She's sleeping in a bedroom by herself. Some people will call this a haunting. What it really was, called by a lot of people, is called a premonition, which to me is even scarier. So she's sleeping alone in the bedroom, and according to her, the door opens, and what is described as a little man comes in. She learns later it looks like Paul Byrne, and supposedly the ghost of Paul Byrne comes in, and he starts shuffling around the room. So she gets up and decides. He loved to shuffle. He loved to shuffle.
That's how you knew it was Paul Byrne's.
So she describes it as a short and somewhat angry man, which is how Jean Harlow would be able to describe him as well. So she goes downstairs to have a drink, and then she sees something even worse, which is an apparition of someone who's bloodied all over, tied to the post of the stairs, the handrails of the stairs with rope, and she says it looks like Jay Sebring. So another...
Did she go up to it and say that to it?
Are you Jay Sebring? She is obviously goes back upstairs. Her nerves are shaking. I don't know why she didn't run out. Which is the part
this is what I don't understand about this story. When you see something like that, you don't live in the city. You leave the city. You never come back.
She needed a drink for nerve-sitting purposes, and she didn't know where the bar was. And something told her about this bookcase. Inside, there was a hidden bar. She poured a shot. So that happens there. Now we skip back over. Years later, we go 1.5 miles south down Benedict Canyon to 10050 Cielo Drive, Los Angeles, California. This is the house where, infamously, she is murdered along with Jay Sebring, who is visiting her at the time, and Abigail Folger, who's an heir to the Folger's Coffee. And then a couple other people. One guy's name I can never pronounce, so I'm not going to try, and Stephen Parent.
Charles Manson.
If you don't know about the Manson killings, I don't know how you don't know about it. Charles Manson got a couple of people to co-visit this house where I forgot who was, a music producer used to live, but that music person wasn't there. The real reason, there's a lot of claims of what Helter Skelter was really about. When it came down to it, really was, there was a member of the Manson family who was going around committing crimes very similar to these murders, where he was hacking people to death and writing on the walls. They wanted to show the cops that he was innocent by committing similar crimes. So you see people are getting hacked, you let him go. So it just happened. So they decide to commit a crime in similar fashion to get their friend out of jail. This involves hacking 3 people to death. Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Monica Sabian, and the infamous, very scary Tex Watson go to the house and kill everybody. It's creepy and horrifying, but it's not haunted. A lot of people don't know this. They tie a noose around Sharon Tate, and there's a beam that's not connected to the ceiling. They loop that over, and then they tie it, I believe, to have like a Folger. So it's like a tug of war. So if one runs away, the other one is pulled, and then it just gets stabbed. Sharon Tate gets stabbed 108 times. She had a baby at the time. She no longer had the baby after that. There's a lot of claims that the baby was pulled out of the body. I don't think that's true. But she dies there, obviously. Epic Folger dies there. And then J.C. Ring is tied to the handrails, and he's stabbed to death and bloodied, much like the apparition that Sharon Tate had seen years before at Paul Byrne's house up the street. So nobody wants to live there anymore, obviously. The neighbor, David Ullman, moves in, and he begins to hear screams coming from the place. He hears footsteps. There's a lot of like just spooky behavior after that, a lot of orbs and cold spots and stuff like that. I can't attest to that, obviously.
You've never been cold in your life.
What's this feeling people keep talking about? The neighbor has filmed a lot of stuff. He's currently doing a documentary called The House at the End of the Drive, I believe.
Last House on the Left? At the End of the Drive?
They're actually very similar, if you've seen Last House on the Left. Probably less pee.
No. Same amount.
I'm peeing just talking about it.
We're all peeing.
But yeah, there's a lot of footage online of them going through Sharon Tate's old house, and there's a lot of what I described as lint coming across the screen. They described as orbs. I don't know. Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails moved in years later, and he called it, I forgot what he called it, Pig Studios or something like that, because Death to Pigs is written on the walls in blood. There's not a lot of stories about his experiences, but how could you live there and not feel like that gut feeling of people?
How could you live there?
How could you live there? How could you live there? Apparently, they knocked down the house. They even moved the dirt, and they changed the address to 10066 or something.
They moved it on top of an ancient native burial ground instead.
There's a picture online. Somebody took a picture there. They found the door. They moved the door to another house.
Jim Morrison?
Hate you so much. Can we one day talk about just how Janis Joplin smashed a glass against Jim Morrison's head? That could be an entire podcast episode. I can go on forever. I read this somewhere that Trent Reznor was at a market nearby, and Sharon Tate's sister came up to him, and she was just like, how can you live there? And he was trying to defend it, it's part of American folklore. And she was like, my sister was killed there. How do you live there? That's Sharon Tate's story.
My first story is both...
For my first story.
Chapter 1, the story.
It was a dark and stormy story.
So this one is both on the creepy and the haunted sides. Mm-hmm. It starts with a really creepy, high-profile murder and ends with a nice haunting. Mm-hmm. And it's the Menendez murders.
Oh, I've always wanted to know more about this.
Yeah. What? Yeah. We'll start at the beginning. Okay. Jose Menendez was a Cuban immigrant, and Kitty Anderson was a good old American girl, and the two met at Southern Illinois University in 1962. They were like Lucy and Ricky, except that little Ricky went on to grow up and kill both of them.
And we never saw that episode, did we?
No, that's the Thanksgiving special. So Jose was very determined to become successful in the United States, mm-hmm. and this dominating drive and overpowering personality eventually took over and defined his entire family. So Kitty's dreams and ambitions had to take a back seat as Jose started to move up in the world of business, eventually to become the president of Leone Container Company, then an executive at Hertz, and then soon the worldwide general manager of Hertz.
The car rental place?
The one and only.
Okay. Not donuts? Hertz Donuts?
Worldwide general manager, which was a position where he earned a reputation for abusing and demeaning his subordinates. And former coworkers in all of his jobs, not just that one, said that he liked to humiliate his white colleagues, especially when they made mistakes, because he himself was insecure about being foreign. And he insisted that people call him Joe rather than Jose.
No way, Jose.
After that, he went on to work for RCA Records, where he was the one responsible for signing musicians like the Eurythmics and Jefferson Starship. Ooh. And he was known here for having somewhat dubious business practices, but he ended up becoming the executive vice president and chief operating officer for RCA Records' worldwide operations. Yeah. After RCA, Jose became president of Live Entertainment, a video distribution company in LA, and that moved his family out of New Jersey and into sweet Calabasas.
Oh, Calabasas. They're very similar, Jersey and Calabasas.
Yeah, it's the New Jersey of the West. During this whole time, Joe dominated the relationship he had with Kitty, and kitty cat. And at the same time, he had many a mistress. And this was a secret for a while.
Yeah.
But soon enough, Kitty found out and left the family for a short period of time. But she soon came back depressed and suicidal. So it was Kitty 2.0. Also during this time, the couple had 2 kids. They had Lyle, born in 1968, and Eric with a K, born in 1970. So Jose, of course, wanted his sons to become even more successful than he himself had become. So he pushed them very hard to, grow up to be refined businessmen, and he became frighteningly controlling over every aspect of their lives, so much so that the boys developed stutters, chronic stomach pains, and really bad tempers.
Isn't that normal?
Yeah, it's just another kid. The brothers quickly took to staying together all the time, and they would comfort each other against the way they were being treated by their dad. So as a result, Eric, who was the younger one, grew up worshiping his big brother Lyle more than anyone else in his life.
Right.
So both kids, of course, grew up to be very immature. And at age 14, Lyle was still wetting his bed and playing with stuffed animals.
What's the cutoff point for that anyways?
26. They also started to exhibit some seriously disturbing psychological issues. When they were 12 and 15, their female cousin was visiting their house, and they were all playing wrestling on the floor. And all of a sudden, without exchanging a word to each other, the 2 brothers tied up their cousin and started to undress her.
Jesus.
And she screamed, and then they backed off just as suddenly as they had started, like a pack of hyenas. And then not long after this, all 3 of them were watching TV, and all of a sudden Lyle climbed on top of her without any warning again and started to molest her, but then she managed to run away.
They have a weird telepathy if they're just like, okay.
Yeah. Jose felt that it was necessary to become very good at one sport. Because he himself was really good at swimming, and that's how he got a scholarship to go to college. So he made the boys both pick a sport to which they would devote themselves, but no team sports, because that would challenge Jose's authority over them. Both boys ended up picking tennis.
Pitting them against each other, or were the same team?
They one of them was the ball, and one of them was
the net. Stay still, Lyle.
Most importantly, Jose wanted them to attend an Ivy League school, which he had always wanted to be able to do, but he had never been able to achieve. After graduating, he just kept trying to get into an Ivy League school. The only problem was that the boys appeared to have learning disabilities, which was a fact that Jose would not accept. And the difference in how poorly the boys performed in class contrasted with how well their homework was done at home suggested that their parents were actually doing their homework for them.
Best parents ever.
Yeah.
Except for everything else, of course.
So somehow Lyle did end up getting accepted into Princeton. He didn't seem to enjoy his time there, and apparently did not make many friends aside from just jocks and people you would see as traditionally popular with cigarettes in their sleeves.
Yeah, smoking in the boys' room.
Riding leather motorcycles. He was flown home to California every weekend by his parents.
God.
Which it's always weird. I don't like it when people go home every weekend.
No, I don't. No.
I don't even go home every weekend, and I live at home.
Street rat.
During his time at Princeton, some of his accomplishments were dating several girls that were older than him, upon whom he lavished expensive gifts. One time, when finding out that he had to have a roommate after requesting a single room, he took all of his roommate's belongings and threw them in the hallway.
Plays well with others.
One friend he did make there was a guy named Donovan Goudreau, who did most of his homework for him. And then when Goudreau got accused by the school of stealing, even though it was pretty obvious he didn't actually do it, Lyle still didn't say a word to try to clear his friend's name, who did all of his homework for him. So then Goudreau was expelled from the school, accidentally leaving behind his ID and security card when he left. Lyle himself eventually got suspended from the school for a year for plagiarizing his homework.
Yeah.
And during this year, Jose sent him to work at Live, but he was so lazy and bad at his job that he was fired by his dad. And
fired by his dad.
During this time, Eric was in high school, and there were suspicions that he was gay, which his parents would not accept either.
How could they possibly?
So his mom gave him a deadline by which to find a girlfriend. And it was also around this time that Eric wrote a movie script with his friend named Friends. No periods between each letter.
Oh, okay.
It was about a son from rich parents who finds their will and sees how much money he'd get when they die, so he kills them. In 1988, Lyle and Eric started breaking into their friends' homes and robbing them.
Oh, cool.
And it didn't take very long for them to get caught.
Yeah.
So Jose hired a lawyer that cut a deal with the court that Eric, since he was underage, would take all the responsibility for the crimes so that Lyle wouldn't have to go to jail, and all Eric would have to do was community service. But part of the deal was also that both brothers had to start undergoing psychological counseling.
Oh, boy.
The proud citizens of Calabasas were so angry with the Menendezes that they didn't want Jose didn't want to live there anymore because it was so uncomfortable. So he moved the family out of Calabasas into 722 Elm Drive in Beverly Hills, California, United States, Earth, Milky Way. They moved into an impressive mansion that used to be the house of both Prince and Elton John, not at the same time. After this, Lyle's girlfriend got pregnant, and Jose didn't want his son having a baby so young, and he didn't like this girl to begin with, so he paid her a personal visit and intimidated her and paid her off to get an abortion and never to see Lyle again. And now, to make Lyle's life even better, he was now no longer just on academic probation at Princeton, he was now on disciplinary probation. After having discussions with their therapist, Kitty started to become scared of their sons and was fearing that they were sociopaths. She started locking the door to her room at night and didn't let them have their own keys to the house.
Jesus.
The sons were getting so out of hand at this point, and nothing the parents were doing was working, so they threatened them with the only thing they knew that would scare them, which was to write them out of their wills.
It worked a little too good.
So everything I'm about to say is known based off of the forensic findings that they made from the crime scene.
Okay.
So, picture this.
Eyes are closed.
Fade in, August 20, 1989.
Oh, boy.
The boys were out. Jose and Kitty were on the couch in their den watching The Spy Who Loved Me, and they were dozing off, and then the boys came home with shotguns, and they went straight into the den where the parents were snuggled up, falling asleep on the couch, and they went straight for Jose.
Very direct guys.
Yeah, they were truly their father's sons. They shot him a few times in the legs and arms before they went behind him and pointed their shotgun directly behind his head and blew through his face.
Oh, boy.
And then Kitty woke up, tried to run away, so they shot her in the legs. She fell to the ground, and then they just started pelting her with shots. But she was still alive, and she was trying to crawl away, but the boys were out of ammo. And they debated whether or not they should let her live, if they thought she would be able to identify them or not. Yeah. So they decided, no, let's just get rid of her.
That was some debate.
Yeah. What do you think, Eric? Shut up.
Shut up.
So they decided she couldn't live, and they went back to the car, and they filled their guns with birdshot.
Jesus
which you should keep in mind for one of my other stories later.
I can't wait.
And they came back in and they shot her in the face. And
Birdshot.
when they were looking at the body, her hand was like damaged in a way that showed that she wasn't, when the bullets were coming at her, she wasn't trying to protect her face. She was trying to block her eyes from seeing who was doing this to her. Lyle was 21 years old and Eric was 18. After this, the boys ditched their guns in a canyon off of Mulholland Drive and went to see License to Kill.
What an appropriate title film.
So they went to see License to Kill in Westwood Village, and then after that, after the movie, they went home to get Eric's fake ID so they could go out drinking, and that's when they went, oh, what happened here? And then they called 911 at around 11 p.m. Lyle made the call while Eric was delirious and crying in the background. They said their parents were shot, the police came, and they didn't suspect their brothers in the least, because why would they?
Yeah.
The brothers said that they saw smoke in the air when they came home, and that the mob probably killed them.
Probably.
But the thing was, none of the other police saw smoke in the air. So the murder happened August 20th, and then on August 23rd, the brothers spent $15,000 on Rolexes and money clips.
They're grieving.
And then on August 24th, they bought a whole bunch of new clothes and cars.
Wow.
And then on August 25th, they held a big memorial service for their parents at the Directors Guild, to which they showed up an hour late.
Fashionably late.
Yeah, covered in money clips.
Are they buried yet?
Wearing a giant Rolex around their stomachs.
Like a wrestling belt.
So after all was said and done, the brothers each got $2 million from the will, which was way less than the $90 million that they were expecting to get. So the brothers decided that it wasn't safe for them to stay in the mansion because the mob might come back to them to finish them off.
How very vague that is.
Yeah. They started hopping from hotel to hotel, and one time running up a $8,800 bill at the Bel Air Hotel during a 5-night stay. And then after that, they moved into adjoining apartments in Marina del Rey.
Adorable.
They had a flap in between the walls. That they lift
What
up
are you
to talk to
doing?
each other. Lyle hired bodyguards to escort him everywhere and limos to drive him everywhere, sometimes jumping out of the limo before it could even stop so he could jump out and run into stores to buy whatever expensive thing he saw.
Quick, a lollipop.
My dad died. One for my brother. So eventually he couldn't afford the bodyguards anymore, so he got rid of them, saying that his uncle had made a deal with the mob and that they wouldn't bother him anymore. So both of the brothers went on to make horrible investments and choices with their money. For example, they paid a guy like $60,000 a year to be their full-time tennis trainer.
They just gotta get the career going. It's the same guy who taught O.J. Simpson how to golf.
And they also bought a chicken wing shop.
Oh.
And during this time, the forensic evidence of the crime scene started to slowly reveal that the murderers may have been, in fact, the brothers.
There's no way.
And when detectives started asking questions to the people that they knew, they began behaving even more suspiciously. But then the final piece of the puzzle fell into place when the murder guns they found were traced to a Big 5 in San Diego, signed by none other than Donovan Goodrow.
His roommate.
Lyle's, not his roommate, just his friend.
Oh, okay.
The guy, but he left all of his
Yeah,
information.
he left all his stuff, yeah.
But it was signed with handwriting matching Lyle's.
Ooh.
So on March 8th, on his way to the Cheesecake Factory with his friends, Lyle was arrested by the police. And Eric, meanwhile, was in Israel playing tennis, but he had the opportunity. He could have disappeared and never returned, but he was so dependent on Lyle that he turned himself in. So the trial was eventually held at the Van Nuys courthouse with the same judge that would go on to preside over the Rodney King trial not long after that.
Right.
And then the brothers in court were really smug and cocky, and they didn't seem to understand how serious that their situation was.
Right.
And the family on the Menendez side showed up and supported them. They didn't believe anything. The
not.
Anderson side from their mom didn't show up at all. There was a long debate in the trial over whether or not the recordings of their therapy sessions could be used as evidence against them.
Yeah.
But in the end, they decided that they could be. And what they heard in them was several threats against their parents' lives and basically admitting to the murders. So their defense became, from that point on, that, yeah, we did it, but here's why.
Okay.
They said that Jose was abusive, which there's plenty of evidence of.
Yeah.
But they also said that he sexually molested them, which there was no evidence of. So after a few complicated trials, they were eventually convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, lying in wait, and multiple murder, and they were sentenced to life in prison.
Very good.
Yeah. Bravo.
Bravo, jury.
They tried to get sent to the same prison, but the court wouldn't allow it. So Lyle is now in the California Correctional Institution, and Eric is in the California State Prison. And now this is where the Haunted comes in.
Oh, I can't wait.
After the trial, the murder house was sold for $3.7 million. The house seemed okay to live in at first, but then problems kept occurring in the den.
Ooh, where they were killed.
The TV started to always show a blank screen on it, and then the TV kept playing James Bond movies, no matter what channel they were on. And then technicians found no problem with the TV at all. They got a new TV. It did the same exact thing. And if you haven't already recalled, the parents were watching a James Bond movie when the murder happened, and the brothers had gone to see a James Bond movie right after they had committed the murder.
It's very unsettling.
Yes.
It is terrifying.
Very unsettling.
No one should be watching that much James Bond films. I remember watching a special some time ago, and it all laid on the guilt of the fact that they went back to the car to reload the gun to come back in to shoot their mother. That little debate they had: should we kill mom or not?
That age-old debate.
Do you think mom recognizes us? Stop calling her mom!
Did you pack my lunch for tomorrow? His last words to her. So what have you got for us now?
I'm going to take us back a little bit. We've been talking about crimes and the hauntings that stem from them. I got one more in store for you. I'm going to be talking about the Lincoln Heights Jail, 421 North Avenue 19. I passed this building a million times. I had no idea that it was once a jail because now it is the Bilingual Foundation for the Arts, or of the Arts, excuse me. And for a while, it was it just housed a bunch of different things. Like, it had a boxing gym for a while. The Lincoln Heights Jail is known for two things: Bloody Christmas and the hauntings that happen here at the Lincoln Heights Jail.
And their pie.
That's so good.
It's just so good.
I've never been to the bakery inside, though. They just have pie.
You'd think a prison wouldn't be known for their pie, but,
Horrible cake, though.
You can only do one or the other.
So this place, throughout the years, is known by the locals as one of the most infamous drunk tanks in LA. You get drunk, they haul you in. The Lincoln Heights Jail, if you go through the pictures on the LA public library photo collection, there's a lot of pictures of just like Christmas Day and the room's just full of drunks. And there's nowhere to sit. This jail is really, really steeped in like LA noir history. It played a role in Slick Lagoon. It played a role in Zoot Suit riots. It housed a lot of inmates that are big in like the crime world. Mickey Cohen was there for a little bit. Raymond Chandler spent a night in the drunk tank. There was a burlesque dancer named Betty Rowland, a very beautiful woman who spent a couple nights there. And William Hickman, I don't know if you know who he is. He kidnapped a little girl named Marion Parker, who was the daughter of a banker. Because I told you about it. I was doing research about Elysian Park because I lived close to Elysian Park. I played there as a kid. I really wanted there to be a haunting in Elysian Park. There's the Llorona, which is just an old Mexican folk tale, which is everywhere. It's not specific to Elysian Park. But what I found when doing research for Elysian Park was that there's just a lot of awful things happen in Elysian Park. One of which is William Hickman kidnaps this little girl. He wants to get a ransom for her. He panics, though, before he's able to get his money, and he kills her. He cuts her into little pieces, but he still wants his money. So he makes a deal with her father to, I'll leave your daughter in this spot, you leave the money, and we'll do the trade-off. But he's already killed her.
So he left her in many spots.
Exactly. He uses wire to prop her body up on a box and sews her eyes open and drives by the dad like she's still alive. Dad drops the money off. He keeps driving with the pieces of this little girl. He drops it all over Elysian Park.
Cigarette in her mouth.
Hello. They drop the pieces of little Marion Parker all over Elysian Park, where I played as a child. And then they end up catching this gentleman in Oregon. They bring him back down. They hold him in the Lincoln Heights Jail.
They always run to Oregon.
You can get away with anything in Oregon.
You can get away with murder, actually. That's the motto.
And supposedly it goes all the way back to like the gold rush. They used to hold like unruly gold prospectors there at LA, at Lincoln Heights Jail, which I can't even imagine.
Like
what that
the
would be
guy
like.
from the Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
I haven't seen it. Stop bringing it up. I get it. I'm not as
I watch movies.
Bogart. I don't know if you know who he is or not, but totally Bogart.
There's this movie I just watched. It's called Casablanca. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Casablanca.
Queso Blanco.
So Lincoln Heights Jail pretty much gets weeded out because LA County Jail becomes really, it starts taking over all responsibilities. The last big thing that it's responsible for is the Watts riots. They hold a lot of people that are involved in the Watts riots down there. I believe it closes about like 58 or something. I'm going to be talking really quickly. I'll just bring up a couple of things that I know you're interested in. James Alroy wrote the novel LA Confidential, which is part of the LA Quartet that he wrote. I just finished The Big Nowhere. It's great, by the way.
He had a whole quartet?
Yeah, there's 4 novels.
A barbershop quartet of novels?
Each novel is about a member of the quartet.
And then they made one big book called The Quartet Avengers.
So he writes LA Confidential. They make the movie in the 90s. They film the movie, the scene about Bloody Christmas there at the jail. They film Nightmare on Elm Street there, the jail scene where the boyfriend is locked up because they think they killed Tina.
All I can think of is Johnny Depp's blood right now.
They also filmed the Blink-182 video and a Lady Gaga video there. I don't want to talk about that anymore. I've said too much. It's Christmas. It's 1951. Everyone's celebrating. The police are celebrating over at headquarters, and a group of Mexican gentlemen are celebrating at a bar in Riverside. I forgot what it's called, but it's Riverside Drive, which is really close. It like runs alongside the Lincoln Heights Jail. 2 police officers are called to get these men out. They're unruly, and it's time to get them out of the bar. They don't want to leave. A fight breaks out in the parking lot. The cops are outnumbered by these Mexican gentlemen. One cop gets a black eye, the other one gets stitches. They are arrested later that night. 5 of the gentlemen are brought back to Lincoln Heights Jail. They're arrested at home. One guy doesn't get that good treatment. They drag him out of his house, apparently. They beat him in front of his family, and then they drive him back to, guess where, Elysian Park, and they beat the S out of him. He's like invalid for like months after that beating. Like it's horrible. It's still Christmas. Cops have been partying for hours now. They hear that these 2 cops have been beaten up by these guys who are downstairs at the Lincoln Heights Jail. And they hear, the story keeps keeping embellished about, just like in LA Confidential. They hear that one of the guys has lost the eye, the other guy's on his deathbed. So they go downstairs. there are the 5 Mexican gentlemen and 2 white gentlemen there in the cell. They get brought out, so there's 7, and they line them up against the wall. And I keep reading several police officers, and I finally got a number. I don't know if this is true, but I believe it. 50 police officers beat 7 men, unprovoked 7 men for what I remember.
Well, five Mexican men have the power of 50 LAPD cops.
Yeah, they get beat for what I remember reading was 95 minutes. After the beating, the wall and the floor is just bloody. It looked like a killing floor.
It's disgusting.
It is horrible. They are all hospitalized for a very long time, understandably hospitalized.
Wimps.
This pretty much brings down the LAPD for a while because they had such a good reputation up to that point. They're able to hide it for a while.
Have they recovered?
I don't think they have, honestly. I read a lot about Bloody Christmas, and their names were only mentioned like a couple times. They keep being referred to as 5 Mexican men. I know Danny Rodell, I believe, was the man who was beaten in the Legion Park.
Which apparently still...
It still happens, according to a very credible source.
According to our informant.
Yeah, still happens. I tried telling him, I was reading this story about, we both grew up in Elysian Park, and they took him to the park and beat up. Can you believe they did that in the 50s? It's like, they do it to this day. This pretty much brings the police are put under the spotlight as being corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
The police chief at the time is William Parker. He's telling the press, these people are coming, the Mexican activists are just trying to discredit the police department. He's doing his own investigation to figure out what he is, because he actually, from what I read, was not a bad guy. He's doing his own investigation, although he's lying to the press. They find out what happens, and my favorite part of the story is that there's 50 cops who are there for this. They're all getting investigated now by the grand jury, and all 50 of them have a really vague story. They don't remember who was there, what happened, and then there's these 7 men who were beaten up, and they remember everything. And they're like, I wonder who's telling the truth. 8 officers are locked away after that. Like, they pretty much just... the LAPD is broken down at this point. They're seen as corrupt in the eyes of LAPD.
That's not, 8. That's kind of a victory to have 8 of them.
I think it was. Yeah. Now, nobody is killed in this. They're in Bloody Christmas. Only their reputations and their bones. So the hauntings don't stem from Bloody Christmas. That was just something that happened there. That's a really big event in LA history. But it's still a jail. A lot of people died there. One man hung himself there. Now, after, the 58 jail closes down, it would be really hard to notice a haunting while the jail was still active. Moans for help are not something that you care about when it's full of men who are probably moaning for help at the same time. Now that the jail is empty, a lot of things start catching people's attentions. There's cell doors that open and close by themselves. There's unusual cold spots.
It's cold spots.
Cold spots.
I wish you could experience one. You're just so warm.
Stay gold.
Stay cool, baby.
They hear clanking chains. They hear horrible moans for help. I keep hearing it as like the most blood-curdling moans for help.
Prison moans.
Prison moans. Can you believe it? I read a story from a woman who's the stage manager for the Bilingual Foundation of the Arts, who stayed in an office that used to be, I believe, a cell or like a big office there. Probably the drunk tank. She's staying with a friend in like a sleeping bag. Beautiful, beautiful. It's very wide, nowhere to sit still. They're sleeping in sleeping bags, and she, during the night, she just has a feeling that someone's watching her. And she turns to her friend that she's next to in a sleeping bag, and apparently his eyes are open, but they're like blackened, and he's like possessed and starts speaking like, and she screams, and the guy wakes up and had no recollection of what happened. Some people claim to see a woman in a white, they call her the White Bride, and she's like half an apparition who's like dancing by herself. Supposedly,
is it half of her body, or is she's there but her partner isn't there?
No, half of her body, like the upper half. Yeah, half like the upper half. Upper half. If I saw legs dancing, right. I would be really scared if I saw just legs dancing. Damn legs. Hello, nurse. Yeah, so there's a half a bride dancing on Cell Block 3. Supposedly, she was like a wife to one of the prisoners, and she would come and they would whatever. Okay. That's the thing about doing all this research is you read the forum posts and you read little things here and there with misspellings, and I keep saying, I want substantial evidence, but it's all hauntings. There is no substantial evidence. And like I said, when I started, like I wanted to stay away from like ghost hunters and stuff like that. I wanted to, discover stuff on my own. So Lincoln Heights Jail, I'd never heard of the jail. I didn't know Bloody Christmas was a real thing. I didn't know that it was haunted. So all this stuff was new to me. Then I found out that Cartoon Network has a show called Other Sighters. A bunch of children who do paranormal investigation are in the Lincoln Heights Jail, and they see orbs, and there's chairs that move by themselves and stuff like that. Broke my heart. Broke my heart.
But they don't have a podcast.
No, they have a TV show. For a while, there was a boxing gym there, and one of the trainer name was Johnny Flores. He was a really good boxer, but he got wounded, I believe, in World War 22. So he couldn't professionally box, but he trained there. And he was told by somebody, don't go in the elevator, always take the stairs. Don't bother with the elevator. He's like, why? He's like, well, it's got the same feeling that everything else has. Don't go in the elevator. In 1994, the trainer, Johnny Flores, falls down an elevator shaft and dies. Yeah, and so the Lincoln Heights Jail, it like I said, it's really steeped in like LA noir, and it's got a lot of history to it and a lot of hauntings and stuff. I wish the other siders didn't get to it first.
Our arch nemesis.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Some sort of
oh my god.
Some sort of beast just walked by the door of where we're. I think that was the ghost of Christmas of dead people. Okay, so my next story is it's a lot lighter than everything we've talked about. Mm-hmm. There's no. There might be a murder. Nah, there's no murders.
Hey, don't spoil it right away.
Yeah.
Give you the chance of a murder.
There might be a murder. This is more of a debunking than a truly scary story.
Okay.
This is The Lady in Black. The legend is that a woman dressed entirely in black 1920s mourner's attire is seen nightly wandering through the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. And this woman carries 2 red roses in her hands as she walks the same path every time towards the same grave every time. Mm-hmm. And she places the roses at the grave, pauses, bows her head, and then disappears. Oh, and if any stupid idiot has the courage to go up to her, they get glared at by 2 devilish red eyes through the blackness of her veil.
Oh, thank you.
A few times, people have gone over to the roses that she left after she disappeared to try to get a souvenir, only to have the roses jump up at their faces and gash at them with their thorns. Yeah. And the grave that this woman is visiting is of Rudolph Valentino. Now, arguably America's first true, scandalous and excessive movie star, who kind of set the model for everything we think of a movie star is. He was the first big movie hunk, really. And he was supposedly poisoned by a jealous lover for having cheated on her with another woman. Some say the Lady in Black may be this killer trying to atone for what she did, but there's a lot of theories about who the woman is. Now, that's the only scary part. Okay. It's not scary anymore.
Oh, make it scary.
Let's have the true story. So Rudolph Valentino was born, get ready for this, Rodolfo Alfonso Raffaello Piero Filiberto Guglielmi di Valentino d'Antoguolo in Castellaneta, Italy on May 6, 1895.
That's his whole name.
Yeah, 1895 is his family name. So after his dad died and he was rejected from the Italian Naval Academy for his physical frailness, he went on to get an agricultural science degree in a college near Genoa. But after, just a leisurely visit to Paris, he fell in love with the glamour and the lifestyle that goes along with that city. Yeah. He took up a cosmopolitan way of life, and he began dancing. His mom sent him money to come back home to Italy. He used it all to gamble, and he lost it all. So he came home as an embarrassment. Everyone on his way home from France to Italy was just pointing at him.
All in, whatever that means.
He left at age 18 to go to America. Where the money he was given to, get himself started in the country, he used to upgrade to a first-class cabin. So when he got to New York, he had no money again. So he started working various odd jobs, supposedly prostituting himself to women and men, until one night at a club, he was taught the hot new dance that was sweeping the nation, which was the tango. So knowing the tango, combined with his exotic looks, he started getting gigs to dance at really upscale clubs where he was able to latch himself to the other top talents that were performing in these places also. He even performed for Woodrow Wilson in one of these places.
The president.
He couldn't help himself, and he got involved with a really rich but really unhappily married Chilean heiress. He went on as her gardener because he had his agricultural science degree, and it's safe to assume that they had an affair. And when the heiress finally divorced her husband, Valentino was called on to testify in court to show the husband's infidelities. After the divorce, the husband, who was really well connected, had Valentino arrested on vice charges. Ooh. And this made him an outcast from all the upscale clubs he was working at, and they loved being in so much. So to make matters worse, the Chilean heiress decided, I want to shoot him. So she shot her now ex-husband, and Valentino didn't want anything to do with this. So
first smart move.
Yeah. So he spent all of his money, and in 1917 he went west with a theater troupe where he was convinced to try his hand at the newly born film industry. So he started auditioning for movies, and he kept dancing, and he kept dating more wealthy heiresses until 1921 he got a role in The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, where he broke the studio's habit of casting only milk-fed, pale-skinned looking people, and they milk faces, and they so in favor of his swarthy Mediterranean olive guzzling looks. And then the same year he starred in a movie that would turn him into the icon that he became, which was The Sheik, where he plays an Arab sheik who kidnaps a British woman and sort of rapes her, and then they fall in love. He was so charming and exotic in it that it tapped into the whole forbidden fruit aspect of all these dark Europeans that started coming into the country at the time. All the moviegoers fell in love with him. Some women even fainted at the screenings of the movies, and then a train came at them on the screen and they all ran away. One reporter even asked him if he thought that a white woman would ever fall for a savage like the one he played in the movie. And he answered that people are not savages because they have dark skins. So this performance led to the way that, when people see like a wealthy Arabic man dressed in a similar way to how he was on screen, they assume he's a sheik automatically. It also started the whole Middle Eastern trend that had a noticeable impact on the buildings that were built around this time, and also on the fashion that people were tending to favor. The song The Sheik of Araby was about this character. Chic condoms were made with a silhouette of Valentino on them. So Valentino had a few failed marriages in his life. One was to a lady who turned out to be a lesbian, and another that he got in a lot of legal trouble in because he married her while he was still technically married to the first one, so he was arrested for bigamy.
But she was a lesbian, it doesn't count, Your Honor.
Gay marriage is illegal. There were also rumors that Valentino himself was secretly gay. His cultural impact was so tangible that tough guy men all over the country were furious with him because he was the catalyst for what was probably America's first metrosexual movement. He was very pretty. So men in different newspapers kept tearing him apart for making everything in the country effeminate. There was this whole thing like some guy saw like a pink soap dispenser in a men's room, and he was like, Valentino! and he wrote some op-ed about him. Valentino was so furious about this, he challenged these people to a boxing match because they were all writing anonymously, and he said, if you're so manly, come and box me and we'll see who's more manly. Valentino's party habits caught up with him very quickly, and he developed a serious ulcer condition, but he kept on living a really lush lifestyle with a lot of parties and substance abuse until he was found in his hotel crippled by pain and spitting up blood, and he was rushed to the hospital where they found out that he had multiple ulcers and a burst appendix. So they did surgery immediately, but it didn't stop the pain, and he couldn't eat. And after a few days, an infection that was inside of him spread, and he died on August 23rd, 1926. Is that August.
Augustus Gloop? Does it all come back to him?
So he died August 23rd. He was 31 years old. So remember that he was as popular at the time that he died as all of the Beatles wrapped into one, only Italian. And he was called the Great Lover, and he was referred to as catnip to women. So when he died, there had been so many fans waiting outside the hospital to see if he was okay that when the news eventually broke out to the crowd that he was dead, the police had to call for backup to keep them from storming the hospital. In the crowd, also, a few women attempted to commit suicide. And then a couple days later, an actress in London was found dead in her apartment, surrounded by pictures of Valentino. And a couple months later, this 20-year-old mother in New York poisoned herself and shot herself twice, saying, I'm coming to you, Valentino. But she survived, and she was immediately sent to an asylum. So between 80 and 100,000 people visited the church that his funeral was in. An airplane flew over the funeral and dropped rose petals all over the crowd, with the thorns still in it. It was rumored that they used a wax replica of his body in the church because they were afraid of his fans would literally come up and rip him to pieces.
Catnip.
It was not unjustified because some people at the ceremony tried to storm the church as well. His fans loved storming.
It was a new craze at the time.
They had just learned what storming was.
You mean I could stampede as a human being and call it something else that makes it seem like I'm not a dirty animal?
All this storming started a fight with the police that took 150 cops to stop.
Christ.
Now this is where the Lady in Black comes in.
Okay.
So on every anniversary of his death, a woman dressed entirely in black mourner's attire would go straight to Valentino's grave, lay down a few roses, say a prayer at his grave, and then leave. And nobody knew who this was. And then in the early 1940s, the press took notice and they ran a story about this mysterious woman. And then a woman named Marion Watson came forward and said that she was the woman in black and that Valentino had proposed to her the night before he was hospitalized. And then another woman came forward saying that she was the woman in black and that she was secretly married to Valentino. And then another one came forward saying, well, we secretly had a kid. And then one came forward saying, my mom was Valentino's great unrequited love. And then another one came forward saying, I am Spartacus. This kept going on until the true Lady in Black was fed up with all these imposters, and she finally came forward in 1947. And her name was Deetra Flame. And her story was that as a young girl, she got really sick and she was put into the hospital. And Valentino, who was a friend of her mom, Deetra being a fan of Valentino, he came to the hospital to try to cheer her up. So he brought a pair of roses to her bedside and he was talking to her. And she was saying to him that she was afraid that she was going to die. But he said to her, you're not going to die at all. You're going to outlive me by many years. But if I die before you please come and stay by me because I don't want to be alone. Not long after this, he did die, and Deetra brought roses to his grave every year until 1954, by which point his death anniversary had become just a really tacky spectacle. And she was just one of many ladies in black that was coming to visit every year.
Was there a reason why she was shrouded in black when she did it?
Because, I mean, she had respect for it.
That doesn't make sense to me.
I don't understand the concept. In 1977, she started visiting again, but now she was in regular clothes, and she continued doing this until she died in 1984, and her grave now reads Lady in Black. But now, every year, you yourself,
Me?
come on down to Los Angeles, California, and you can go to the Valentino Memorial Service. They have it every August 23rd at 12:10 p.m., which was the time that he died, where a whole gaggle of men and women dressed in black, they gather at his grave, they tell old stories, they watch old clips of his, they play music. But despite knowing all this truth, people still insist that a woman in black is still wandering every night through the cemetery with these roses. But even if that isn't true, there's plenty of ghosts in that cemetery, including Valentino himself. And Valentino, he had some potent spirit because his dog also haunts the pet cemetery in Calabasas.
Where the
Menendezes would spend their time.
My family every year does the Day of the Dead altar there at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and walking around, there's always a big thing happening at Rudolph Valentino's little site. It's amazing. I'm going to be talking about Rancho Los Amigos, a hospital in Downey, which was once known as Hollydale, which was once known as Sunny Acres, which was once known as the Poor Farm, which was once known as the LA County Poor Farm, which was once known as the LA County Farm, which was once known as the psychopathic ward of the LA County Farm.
Which was once known as Prince.
This is an abandoned hospital that still stands, and it's very large. I read 55 acres. I don't know if that's true because I don't know acreage, but I know that it's big. I drove around, and it's not an easy drive. I can only imagine walking, which you're really not supposed to do because the main quarters up front is a police station. Downey, like I was saying, was 12 miles south of downtown LA. The address for Rancho Los Amigos is 56 Descanso Street. Now, there's two Rancho Los Amigos. There's a new one that they built to replace the one I'm about to talk about. That one is fully functioning, as far as I know, not haunted. This one, the old one, abandoned one, supposedly haunted. But let's give a little history on it first.
Yes, let's please skip the history on it.
Like I was saying, it's a police station up front. Everything else is abandoned. The Marines use it for tactical training, for urban stuff like off-base training. They still use it for that. So between Marines running around and cops, and let's not forget, the place is overrun with feral cats. It's just everywhere. There's a cat for every inch of this place. There's so many cats. A lot of old buildings that were never torn down. They're fenced off with barbed wire fences, and they also have their windows and doors are boarded up.
Did the cats do that?
Yeah, they're carpenters. Downey raises them very good. My cousin took me there. He lives right around the corner in Downey. We were talking about abandoned hospitals, and he's like, "Oh, I know of one. It's right over." So he takes me, and I didn't really know what to expect. I just expected an old like LA County Hospital sort of looking building, and we just drive. We do a loop around, and then we leave, and we look at boarded up windows, and they kind of get the spooks. This is like a little ghost town. Like, it's so big, and it had so much functionality before when it was an operating place. And then it's just abandoned. It was never torn down. Originally, the facility was known as the County Port Farm. It was opened in 1887 and 1888, and it was to house like the needy of the area, and it was like a rehab facility which provided work and housing and like medical care for everybody. And from what I read, originally the purchase was for like 124 acres, but I know that it used to be more than just a hospital grounds. It used to be a farmland too. It used to be a self-sufficient agricultural livestock area because they were helping people get back into work. So they were building, they use these workers on the farm, which is why it was called the Poor Farm. By the 1890s, it had become, like I said, completely fully operational as agricultural and the livestock. They had sheep, they had cows, they had chickens, hogs, horses, they had strawberries, peaches, pears, cabbage, corn, celery, sugar beets. And I read that it became like nationally recognized at some point as like a model for how these things should be run for rehab facilities for workers. In the late 1890s, early 1900s, it expands to become like a medical facility for everybody because they keep getting, the poor are coming and they have diseases that can't be treated anywhere else, like polio and TB. It becomes really big on treating that sort of long-term invalid people eventually. It expands not only in practice and how they operate, but they keep building new buildings. They keep constructing on everything. The man responsible for this was named William Ruddy Harriman. He takes over as superintendent in 1915 of the Poor Farm, and he completely revamps everything. They were doing well already, but he pushes it forward because there's this surge of finances after World War I, so he has just the money to do stuff like this. He expands medical operations. He gets more staff in because they had about like 500 destitute men and women and about 45 people just taking care of everybody. Now he steps it up. After this point, after Harriman takes over, they start push forward. They now offer around-the-clock patient care and attention. They have patient wards. There's addition to the men and women's psychiatric buildings. They have dining rooms, nurse dormitories. They have a water tower. They have a power plant. Like I said, there's streets within this facility. It looks like a little town. There's paved streets everywhere. They have employee bungalows. They build a large auditorium. I've read about the history from this plan to build a bigger auditorium, and what they want to do is basically just have movies and plays and get people like functioning to each other. It became like a big center for.
And this was all built by feral cats.
If
I'm paying attention.
The ghosts of feral cats built this place. It also had a library that was county run. Call back to the first episode.
Boo. Listen to the first episode.
Harriman moves into this beautiful house on the course, which I've seen, which is what house I don't believe is boarded off, but that's probably because the cops live there. By 1922, they have 1,500 ambulatory patients living there and about 175 employees. It's a big jump between the two. They just, like he says, he's pushing everything forward. The next couple decades, it keeps expanding and then kind of plateauing. After World War II, they started bringing in a lot of patients from there, a lot of veterans from World War II, not only treating like physical wounds, but also helping men with PTSD. There's this legend that it's a mental asylum, not as much as just like a psychiatric ward. Mm-hmm. So they have a lot of stories like this. I keep reading stories about torturing patients, blah, blah, blah. I really don't think that, but I do think that there were some really unhappy people there. And then the 80s hits. Reagan-era conservatism takes over. And then this place, like most other psychiatric wards, are kind of cut down because of budget cuts. There's like a really critical eye on the way mental hospitals are helping people. A lot of those people get put out on the street. They get money for a new building, so they're able to do that, but this big facility is pretty much just shut down after. They lose funding, they can't operate anymore, so they have another building and they leave this place. One of the forum posts that I was reading put it really perfectly. It doesn't look like there's any signs of struggle, but someone definitely left in a hurry because they just left everything. Like there's paper, there's charts everywhere. It just looks like they just left without like packing up. And it has this feeling of like a post-apocalyptic attack where everything was just left over. And they're just like, whatever. And there's a lot of pictures of like trespassers. And that's basically what they are now. People who like film sneaking into these buildings and
people
put it on.
Sneak into buildings and record podcasts.
Exactly.
I hate those people.
Idiots. Yeah. Mm-hmm. My favorite rumor is that the reason the county hasn't torn all this stuff down is because they don't want to endanger the feral cats that run the place. They run the place. There are so many cats. Apparently there's a lady that comes and feeds the cats. I think that I'm pretty sure they ate the lady because they're just so strong. I know what you're thinking. Oh, there's probably about 12. No, there are so many.
There's 12 elders of the cats.
The cat council. A lot of people sneak in on the property, which, I drove there at night. My cousin shows me during the day. It has such an effect on me that I return the next night. I'm driving around the property. It's even scarier. Like during the day, it's really unnerving. It's like the first episode of Twilight Zone. where there's just signs of life and there's no life there.
My girlfriend really wants to visit there at night, but I forbid her. You hear that? I forbid you.
I've gone there twice at night, and both times I got stopped by cops almost immediately. And they don't have a problem with me driving around, but they're like, what are you doing here? I'm like, oh, I'm just showing my friend the place. And like, are you going to pull over? And I said, no, I'm just driving around. Like, don't get out of the car. Don't stop driving. Just, you can drive around, but like, don't get out.
It's like when you drive into one of those lion enclosures at a zoo and you can't get out of the car.
The place at night is really, it has such a feeling. There's another rumor which it cannot possibly be true. They had a church facility there. A patient ran up to a priest and said, I need an emergency confession. And the priest is like, oh, okay, it's highly unusual. And the thing that he wanted to confess to him is, I'm going to kill you. And he slit his throat. And then, he took out a security guard and took the keys and started freeing all the other patients. And then they ran around the facility, killing other nurses and stuff. And then ran around Downey and snuck into houses. And then some of them they never found to this day. But there are a lot of claims that, they drive around the lots, you see faces in some of the windows, which is really unnerving. A lot of noises coming from inside buildings. Someone apparently got a book thrown at them while they were alone in a sub-basement of the hospital.
But that was just the police throwing the book at them for trespassing.
I think a lot of the feelings of creepiness people get are just, like I said, cheap thrills of trespassing. However, there was something very interesting I read. In 2006, during a training exercise by the Marines, a few soldiers found a really old freezer and they decided to open it because they're Marines. They're not scared of anything.
Yeah, they're not afraid of freezers like we are.
They found 10 legs, feet, and brain matter mummified for 40 years. Now, apparently, there's no suspicion of foul play. They're all amputated medical specimens. Why would there be? But like I said, they left in such a hurry. They're like, don't worry about the brain matter and the feet. Just leave it here. That's, to me, not only finding body parts and having questions about it and what kind of amputated medical, research is everybody doing, but they just left it there. That's really unnerving to me,
Which means that it was so commonplace that they didn't think we should get rid of this.
I'm not hungry, so just leave the brain matter there. I'm not even going to eat it today.
Take the elbows. So this is the one I was really excited about.
Yeah, I was really excited because you kept building up and you didn't give me anything about
anybody.
it.
I didn't let you go near Griffith Park in case someone whispered something.
I had a picture of it on my laptop and you closed it shut. And he said, how dare you?
And then I ripped up your laptop. So this is The Curse of Doña Petronilla, which I still can't pronounce. This is the second time recording it. Mm-hmm. I kept thinking everyone's name was Dawn or Donna, but that's just their title. This is a really creepy story about betrayal, curses, murder, and ostriches.
All my favorite stuff in one setting.
The story stretches back to the initial settling of Los Angeles, which is just what people want to hear this far into the podcast.
Can you go farther back? There's a fish and it gets out of the water and it starts to walk on its legs.
So it goes all the way back then to as recently as 2007 and even continues on to the present day. In 1781, a man named Jose Vicente Feliz, which is my second Jose, he was assigned because he had military experience to be the military escort for 11 Mexican families that were moving to this area to found El Pueblo de la Reina de Los Angeles, which was the seed from which our entire city sprung from. It was founded September 7th, 1781. You're still able to visit it. It's that thing next to Olvera Street. In 1787, he was appointed by Governor Pedro Fages to be comisionado.
Saying everything right.
He's pretty much the one in charge of the Pueblo until 1800, when life had sort of fallen into a routine. It was a little bit safer, and it was no longer necessary to have a military man in charge. So he retired and applied for a plot of land outside the Pueblo, which he got because life outside the Pueblo was still very dangerous. Yeah. So they figured only a soldier would be able to tame it. So they gave him 6,647 acres, which became Rancho Los Feliz. It covered what is now Los Feliz. That's where the name came from, and also a large part of what is now Griffith Park. So the ranch was referred to as Happy Farm because their name Feliz, which means Christmas. So Feliz died in 1822, and from there the land went to his wife Doña Maria Ignacia Feliz Verdugo, who then in 1853 deeded it to her daughters and her son Don Jose Antonio Feliz. Right. And this is where our story truly begins.
Oh boy.
The daughters ended up selling their shares of the land for $1 an acre to the family attorney Don Antonio Coronel. So Don Feliz was never married, and he lived on the ranch with his sister Soledad and their brother's orphan daughter, Doña Petronilla. So in 1863, Don Feliz contracted smallpox, and fearing that he would spread it to the 17-year-old Petronilla, he sent her away to live somewhere else until there was no more danger of her getting it. So then during this time, the family attorney, Don Coronel, he was also an LA City Council member and also a former mayor, he came to visit with the lawyer of his own named Don Inocante. When they came, Don Feliz, he was already on his deathbed, and the two insisted on drawing up his will before it was too late, which he was dead. He was pretty much dead. And what they did, he was so sick, he couldn't do anything, so it said that the lawyers attached a stick to the back of his head, and they would nod his head for him, whenever they would say some agreement that he would have to agree to. And then they asked him, are you a stupid face? And then they made him nod his head.
This ties back to Marion Parker, by the way,
Yeah,
but not
I
in a
know.
funny way.
Then Don Feliz died, and conveniently, surprise, surprise, Don Coronel got all the land that he had, while Soledad got some furniture, and Petronilla, when she came back to the ranch, she found out she got absolutely nothing.
Wow.
So she was furious, and this is what she said. Your falsity shall be your ruin. The substance of the Feliz family shall be your curse. The lawyer that assisted you in your infamy and the judge shall fall beneath the same curse. You, senor, shall know misery in your age, and although you die rich, your substance shall go to vile persons. A blight shall fall upon the face of this terrestrial paradise. The cattle shall no longer fatten, but sicken on its pastures. The field shall no longer respond to the toil of the tiller. The grand oak shall wither and die. The wrath of heaven and the vengeance of hell shall fall upon this place. Vote Nixon.
That's an intense speech, by the way.
It's very frightening.
Yeah.
I don't know how they know that's what she said. Some people say that for dramatic effect she dropped dead right then and there, but that's not true. She lived for several years after that.
Repeating the speech to several people.
Yeah.
And then I said...
She went on tour with that speech. So with this, the fun really began. The heirs took the case to the Supreme Court, but the judge sided with the well-connected Coronel. It didn't take long until Coronel began to have second thoughts about what he did. The land he now had would flood in the winter, have droughts in the summer, and would burn in between. The cattle got sick and died. The grapes he was growing withered. And then meanwhile, Inocante, the lawyer who helped him with this, was shot to death, and the judge that had presided over the case also met a very unfortunate similar end.
Jesus.
So in 1868, Coronel had enough of the land, and he conveyed it over to a man named Charles V. Howard, who promptly sold the land's water rights, and in celebrating the deal, he got drunk at a saloon and got a little too rowdy with the wrong people and was shot dead.
Oh my God.
After this, it exchanged hands a few times between a financier from San Francisco named Thomas Bell, who he lived to be older, but he died falling off the banister of his mansion, and then James Lick, who was at the time the wealthiest man in California. He also owned Catalina Island.
Ooh.
But nobody who had it could seem to turn a profit from the land, and it eventually got sold to a dairyman named Leon Lucky Baldwin.
How lucky.
I'll tell you how lucky. His cows got sick, fires destroyed his grains, grasshoppers ate his crops, and his dairy failed. And then he got even luckier when he went on a business trip to Mexico and got killed by a band of banditos.
Wow. That sounds like the 10 plagues.
Yeah. The banditos was the 10th plague. He was forced, before he died, he was forced to sell the land on December 8th, 1882 to a very rich gold mine speculator by the name of Colonel Griffith J. Griffith. The J stands for Griffith. He was an eccentric character, and the title he had of colonel actually didn't mean anything because he never served in any military. He just bought the favor from the California Guard to give him the honorary title.
How much does a colonel cost? Give me a colonel.
What about a corporal? Griffith's plan was to try to attract people to come live on the land and to turn it into a suburbs. And part of this great plan of his was to set up an ostrich farm.
Obviously.
And after a couple of years, what suburb isn't complete without an ostrich farm? After a couple of years of struggling with the land, this huge storm hit in 1884 that caused lightning to strike the oaks that were on his property, and it caused the LA River to rise up and flood all the rest of his land. And during this storm, the ranch hands claimed that they saw the ghost of Don Feliz dancing on top of the waves to the El Jarabe, which is the da-na-na-na-na-na-na. Such a fun song for a ghost He's a fun ghost.
He's a fun ghost.
He knows how to afterlive. So then after all this, the ostriches from the ostrich farm took to stampeding at night without any explanation.
Jesus.
And then Griffith became so creeped out himself by the land that he would only visit it at midday. The ostrich farm turned out to be a failure. So he was.
How is that possible?
It was a foolproof plan. And he was forced to foreclose. And then also a man who was renting out part of Griffith's land named Frank Burkett.
Yeah.
He got into a legal disagreement with Griffith over the rights to the land.
Yeah.
And it ended up costing Burkett a lot of money. So he then swore vengeance on Griffith. Then on October 28th, 1891, Griffith took his wife and her sister to the old Cavalry Cemetery, which is now the Cathedral High School next to Dodger Stadium.
Their mascot is the Phantoms because it was built on the grounds of the cemetery. My brother went there.
Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I should have done research. They went there to pay their respects to the family that they had that was buried there. So Griffith gave them their privacy. He waited outside the walls. And as he was waiting, a carriage pulled up next to him. And inside the carriage was Frank Burkett holding a double-barreled shotgun that he used to fire at Griffith's head.
Like a drive-by.
It was the first
drive-by
of a long and proud tradition of drive-bys in this city. But Griffith, he managed to survive the shot and crawl behind the cemetery walls. Burkett thought, well, he's dead. So then he got a revolver and shot himself in the head. But the investigation afterward revealed that the reason Griffith survived was because Burkett had accidentally loaded his shotgun with non-lethal birdshot.
Birdshot.
Which is what the Menendezes
You
had
tell
been using.
you tell Kitty that's non-lethal.
Yeah. So Griffith managed to escape this curse just by dumb luck, but just for the moment. Griffith he couldn't turn any profit on the rancho, so he donated all the land to the city in 1896 because he just couldn't afford the taxes on it.
Yeah.
And supposedly at the party celebrating this very generous donation, the ghost of Don Feliz appeared again and sat down in a seat reserved for Griffith and announced to everyone, "I come to invite you to dine with me in hell. In your great honor, I have brought an escort of sub-demons." They make these Felizes make beautiful speeches.
Subdemons is such a cool term.
I know. At which point the lights went out and the sound of gongs and cymbals filled the room. It's suspected this might have just been an elaborate prank, but nobody stuck around to find out. Or to find out what a subdemon was. From this point on, Griffith began to slowly lose his mind. Many say because of his excessive drinking habits.
That'll do it.
He was Protestant, I believe.
Okay.
And he became convinced that his Catholic wife, Mary Agner Christina Mesmer, was conspiring with the Pope to poison him and take all of his money. And so the
representative of God is here to kill me.
It got to the point that Griffith would switch his plate with hers at dinner when she wasn't looking. And then on September 3rd, 1903, he decided to make the first strike. So he took his wife to the presidential suite at the Arcadia Hotel, made her get down on her knees, gave her a prayer book, and told her to say her prayers.
Not creepy at all.
No. She said her prayers. He aimed right at her face. He shot her, but she jerked her head at the last minute, so the bullet went straight through her eye.
Oh my God.
And she was alive enough to climb out the window and then fall onto the awning below and then crawl into another room. So she survived this. She successfully got him sentenced to 2 years in San Quentin prison.
Her and her husband were really good at avoiding dying from gunshots.
Yeah, they have good genes. He was said to have alcoholic insanity, and he served just 1 year before he got released.
Shot my wife, give me a year.
I could do it in one. So when he got out, nobody wanted anything to do with him. He eventually died of liver disease in 1919, and he left in his will $700,000 to be given to the city to build what would become the Greek Amphitheater and the Griffith Observatory, which will keep the curse going even longer. So after this, the curse took the form a lot of times as a wildfire. On October 3rd, 1933, 3,780 men were clearing brush at the Mineral Wells area when a fire broke out, and a lot of them volunteered to try to fight it. Problem was that none of them knew how to fight a fire, and they all got trapped. When all was said and done, 29 of them died, 150 were injured. The firefighters that came were able to contain the blaze to 47 acres. It remains to this day the deadliest in LA history. Another large fire occurred in 1961. Then in 2006, LA County's Acute Communicable Disease Control Unit put the park on bubonic plague alert.
They had the signs for that on the bike path, and I'd be like, what?
Warning, Black Death ahead.
Don't eat rats.
I know they're delicious, but everyone just stop eating the rats. So they put it on bubonic plague alert when a person that had been hiking through the park had been found to contract it. And then on May 8th, 2007, a huge fire, it burned 800 acres of land in the park. This had been the 5th fire in the park just since 2006.
Jesus.
So then going back to things that have been built by Griffith's death grant, the observatory went on to become the centerpiece of the movie Rebel Without a Cause. This setting defined the movie that went on to define the career of several actors, including James Dean, who defined a cultural movement.
Much like Rudolph Valentino.
The 3 stars of the movie. James Dean died in a traffic accident at age 24. 24?
24, can you imagine that?
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Natalie Wood fell off a boat, hit her head, and then drowned off the coast of Catalina Island.
That's what Robert Wagner wants you to believe. Go ahead.
At age 43. And Sal Mineo was murdered outside his West Hollywood apartment at age 37.
I never, you know what? I never actually thought about.
I know, it was weird. Like they were saying all these things with the curse, and then they mentioned Griffith Observatory, and then they mentioned the James Dean sculpture, and I was like, oh my god, it's all true. Other things that had happened in the park: the suicide of Peg Entwistle. She jumped off the H on the Hollywood sign. There's reports of a ghost of a man walking down the steps near the merry-go-round and disappearing before the last step. People visiting the old zoo grounds have had visions of sick and cannibalistic animals and monkeys hanging themselves. But this is the one that scares me most of all. There's reports of this horrifying humanoid beast that's in the park. He has green skin, red hair, a really long body. His back is bent way back, and then his neck is bent way forward, like a S.
Yeah.
He has no whites in his eyes.
Oh, God.
The rangers in the park, for some reason, are also not allowed to tell ghost stories. Not all of the owners of the land have fallen victim to some unfortunate fate. Like James Lick, he was fine.
Yeah.
But people say this because his part of the land that he owned didn't belong to the part that should have gone to Petronilla. So they say he was exempt from the curse.
It's in that policy, yeah.
Yeah, it's in the curse contract. Nowadays, Don Felice's ghost is reportedly spotted on horseback near B Rock. Griffith's ghost is seen also on horseback roaming around the grounds. Doña Petronilla herself is seen sometimes on horseback, other times in a white dress peering through the windows of the old Paco Feliz adobe at midnight. Griffith Park is the 2nd largest park in California. Come visit.
Terrifying.
It's horrifying.
If you walk that, like, those 2 to 4 hour trails as it's becoming
and
dusk.
You've started too late.
Yeah, and like by the time I get to the car, which I park near the merry-go-round, I'm gonna be dead by this big green monster. Just hide behind the hanging monkeys.
This was, round 2 of doing this. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah.
A few things. We've got our website going now, finally. lameekly.tumblr.com. Check it out. We'll have a lot of pictures of the stuff we talking about. We'll hang a monkey. We'll put a picture of it just so you know what it looks
it's
like.
a bad monkey.
Follow us on Tumblr. Leave a review for us on iTunes.
A nice one,
one. If it's a mean one,
make it funny.
Yeah, really funny.
Roast us.
Yeah, this has been episode 2 of LA Meekly. Hope everyone enjoyed it.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, and catchphrase pending.